G'day, it's Jack. Yeah, Les is away, so I'm playing here. And look, you know I tell a cracker of a yarn, right? But there's another bloke. He spent a lot of time in the bush as a young bloke, and he can tell a really good bush yarn. So I'm going to put a bit of video up on him, okay? Yeah, he's a big shot. He used to own that big rue plant at Ningen, you see. And his name is Tommy Thompson. Yeah, I think he's related to Les. But, well, he can't help that, can he? And don't tell Les.
We're in Australia, and I'm an Australian stockman. And you might say, well, how do you get on when there's no sun on a cloudy day? Well, that's a little more difficult, but there are signs. Take this tree for example, not this exact tree, but this tree. It's facing north, there's the west over, there's the east. I'm on the south, it hardly gets any sun. So, if you look on that side of the tree, normally not on this one because it's exposed, but in a branch of trees you'll find moss. Straight away you know the south. So when you enter the paddock, you get a pretty fair idea where you're going by this little inbuilt compass, if you like. The bush is full of characters. I suppose one of the most memorable ones was when I was working in southwestern Queensland in a place called Currawinga. There was it was part Aboriginal actually and part Chinese, I think, but this is quite a few years ago, and when I knew him he'd probably been in his mid-70s. He was a marvellous stockman, and one of his traits was he'd ride around, and he always had one of these army greatcoats on. And when we asked him why he always wore a greatcoat, even in the summertime when it was 140 degrees in the shade, he would say, well, you see those sheep running around all that wool on, well, you know, that keeps the heat out. But I did catch him one day on a very hot day riding around with a coat rolled up behind his saddle. He also taught me how to stalk birds or swans or any bird on the water. And I did try it, and that did work. That you take a big leafy branch and put it in the water, get in behind the leafy branch, underneath the water with just your head out, and swim towards the birds, and it would appear that it was just a branch or something floating in the river. And when you got close to them, you would dive underneath and open your eyes and look for their legs and just grab them by the legs. I never actually caught a bird that way, but I got very close to them. But obviously that was the way the Aboriginals used to do it. Or he learned from the Aboriginals, and he had not been full-blood himself. Another thing he showed me was he cut open a fish which we caught in the freshwater streams out back. It was actually in the Paroo River. And when we cut it open and took gutted the fish and scaled it, he showed me what they call a windbag or something. It was a membrane inside the fish. And the blood vessels on that membrane looked exactly like a coolabah tree on the river, the branches and everything. And he said, that's a photograph of where that fish was spawned, where it was born. And I sort of half believed him, but every fish I opened after that, I looked at it and they were all different. Well, his name was Charlie Shillingsworth. I think it's probably a made up name, but apparently he came or was born on a place called Tinnaburra. There is a story about that too. It belonged to Jimmy Tyson, a cattle king of the 19th century and possibly lived into the early 20th century. The first place I ever worked on in southwestern Queensland was a place called Currawinga. And it's so different. It's so different. You go out there along the Paroo, and it's on the Paroo River. The Paroo River runs through it. And there's cane grass swamps. The homestead at Currawinga, probably still the same today, is built out of mud, which they call a peasy. So the walls are mud and they're painted on the outside. The original roof was thatched cane grass, as you would see in rural places of England. But at later days that was covered over by corrugated iron. The quarters were, the cookhouse and so forth were the same. The brick oven was embedded into this. But more than that, it was the river. There was trees called Lapunya trees that, to my knowledge, only grow on the Paroo River. and they grow virtually almost to order, fence posts or rails for cattle yards. And it was quite strange that a few years ago now, there was a migratory beekeeper out there, way from anywhere, that found that it produced a wonderful honey. The other aspect of Currawinga was its two lakes. One, they're called Aboriginal names now. We just used to call them Currawinga Lakes and Brara Lake. One lake was probably about 4 miles by 8 miles long, and it was called a brown muddy water. It was fed by the Paru River, and in my day I was told by old timers they'd never seen it dry. Yeah, and on the would be the western side, there was a pure white sand strip, or strip of sand I should say, and on the other side of that was a lake as blue as the sea, and that was called Brara Lakes, and that was salt water. And it attracted a myriad of birds, of black swans, white swans, ibis, all the birds you could think of. And it was just so unusual. You would go to other areas of the station, other paddocks, it was different. Up from the lakes there was a big wash that came down from the stony ridges, and there's what we used to call mud springs. And there were little mounds like miniature volcanoes, and on the top there was mud. And I have been told that at times they just belch and throw up mud, or even throw up a rock. And you could see, you know, rocks on the clay pan beside it, just solitary. Also in Currawinga there was a, this is another bit of bushcraft that you tend to learn. I was riding with the head stockman, who was half-caste Aboriginal, and we were riding through this, along these stony ridges, and they were so steep that you never think there would be water there anywhere, because all the water was down on the plain. And suddenly he said, well, can we go and get a drink? And he went straight to a little native well. He called a native well, and obviously there was a rock, there was a hole about probably 12 by 12, and you could see it had been carved out, and it was full of water. And we had a drink, and I said, how did you find that? Oh, he said, I knew where it was. And knowing that he was brought up with the natives, Aboriginals, the tribe, and they used to roam this country, that I thought, oh well, he knew where it was, because you get to know where the shape of things, and it's exactly the same thing. And I just put it down to he knew where it was. But then when I thought about it, the stony ridges are very much the same. It's the same timber. And then I kept badgering him. I said, how did you find the well? You couldn't remember where it was. And finally he relented. He said, I just listened and looked and followed the birds. Sure enough, where the birds were and whistling and so much, that's where the well was. They were there for the water. Quite simple. Another trick he showed me was when we were riding past a fence post once, and he looked down at the fence post, an old rotting fence post. It was near Currawinga Lakes actually. And he said, there's going to be a flood here shortly. I said, yeah, how can you tell that? He said, oh, I just get a feeling. And we rode again past another post, and he relented, and he looked down and he said, see those ants, see how they're crawling up the post? I said, yeah, well, so what? He said, see what they're doing? I said, no. Have a closer look. He said, they're taking their eggs up from the bottom and putting them in the top. I said, yeah, so they are. Well, that means the flood coming, and they know. Simple things, you might say common sense, but unless you know. And these are the little things that make you a bushman.